Mr. Speaker, the term of the 13th Parliament will end on the 14th of January 2021. An election must be held within 3 months of that, which means on or before the 14th of April 2021. Ideally, we would like to conduct elections in normal conditions. The present situation is not ideal for holding an election, but that does not mean it makes an election impossible. As the Prime Minister said, no decision has been taken yet on the timing of a GE. In making such a decision, the overriding concern is what is best for Singapore and for Singaporeans. Some have suggested only holding elections when we see the tail end of the virus spread. And this is indeed the dilemma that we face. The Prime Minister has laid out the choices clearly. We can hope and pray that things stabilize, but we do not know when the COVID-19 situation will stabilize. Whether it will do so within the next year, by January or by April 2021. But what we do know is an election must be held, must take place by 14th of April 2021. The longer we wait, the more unpredictable, difficult, and dangerous it could be. Compounding this will be the uncertainty that comes with when the election will be held as we go through the year trying to face this crisis together. Alternatively, the country can go for early elections, settle who will lead the country through this major crisis, give the new government a clear and fresh mandate, a full term ahead, legitimacy to take major decisions, tough decisions, in the interest of Singaporeans. Today, more than ever, we need a government that the people has expressed confidence in to take us through this unprecedented health crisis and stabilize the economy and safeguard our people's lives and livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you are sailing into a storm, you want to be certain who your captain is and that he will not be changed halfway. You want to make sure that he is there, together with you, working with you, guiding you through the storm. It's not a good idea to place all our hope in the situation improving before April 2021 and add the uncertainty of when an election will be held to the uncertainties that are already ahead of us. However, we should not close off any options. We have been upfront and open with Singaporeans about the challenges we face, the dilemmas, considerations, and different possibilities, so that Singaporeans will understand why there might be a need to go ahead. However, some suggestions about this issue have been misleading and unhelpful. For example, the suggestion to delay the elections beyond the required time frame of April 2021 until the crisis is over, and to have the President form a caretaker government consisting of some of the current MPs. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've sought the advice of the Attorney General's chambers on whether this can be done. The advice of the AGC is that to delay an election beyond the required date in such a manner is unconstitutional. The only circumstances when the election can be put off beyond the required date is when a state of emergency is declared. Mr. Speaker, sir, although Singapore has weathered many crises since our independence, we have never extended a government's term beyond the constitutional limit. And Singapore is one of the only newly independent Commonwealth countries to regularly hold elections and has never declared a state of emergency since 1965. Declaring an emergency and putting off elections indefinitely is not a precedent we should set lightly. The President's power to declare an emergency can only be exercised on the advice of Cabinet. Even if the President proclaims an emergency, given that the incumbent cabinet remains in office during an emergency, there is no legal basis or practical need for the President to form a new government. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not helpful to mislead people into thinking that such an option exists to put off elections indefinitely and for the President to form a new government when this goes against the Constitution. Even if there is a caretaker government under a state of emergency, it would by definition be a caretaker. It would be hobbled by the fact that it lacks the explicit mandate of voters and would therefore not be in a position to take major decisions on behalf of Singaporeans. And this is the reason why Constitutional Convention requires that a caretaker government not make any far-reaching or long-term measure. So this is the fundamental problem. Just when we need a government with a clear mandate to pull out all the stops in a crisis, to implement strong mitigation measures, to mobilize our resources and reserves, to implement strong economic stabilization measures to save jobs and livelihoods, and to steer the country through the COVID-19 crisis, a caretaker government would not have a mandate to do so. So how can this be in the best interest of the country and our people? So, sir, to suggest this shows a disregard for or lack of understanding of the Constitution, putting forward constitutionally unworkable proposals at a time of serious national crisis can only confuse and mislead Singaporeans to the detriment of Singapore and Singaporeans. This discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on our elections is an important one. It goes to a matter of principle. This government is ever mindful that what is at stake are jobs, businesses, lives, and our decision must be based on what is in the best interests of Singapore and Singaporeans and how we can move forward together. On Mr. D'Souza's second question, he asked about holding elections safely amidst the COVID-19 outbreak. The safety of all Singaporeans is of utmost importance. To combat the virus spread, we have implemented comprehensive measures over the past few weeks at every level. You have heard Minister Gan and Minister Wong. Travel restrictions, quarantine, social distancing measures, strengthening our healthcare institutions, workplace measures, protecting our students in schools, supply of essential goods. If an election takes place, it will not disrupt any of this. All these necessary measures will still be maintained. But COVID-19 has created a new normal. Whether elections are held early or later, we will still have to work on the basis that the next elections will necessarily be different from past elections. This means that the necessary extra safeguards and precautions must and will be taken, whether the elections are held early or held later. So at every step, nominations, campaigning, voting, we will have to make all the necessary arrangements to ensure that parties can campaign effectively, people can vote safely. For example, for campaigning, we can have live streaming of speeches on the internet, adequate TV time for candidates. For voting, we already have special express lanes for seniors and those who need them. We can also have social distancing while queuing, proper hand hygiene for voting paraphernalia, hand sanitizers for voters. We will learn from the experiences of other countries that are holding elections, even during this ongoing COVID-19 outbreak. All these measures and precautions are required to protect Singaporeans. Whatever measures taken will affect all political parties equally. As the Prime Minister said, no decision has been taken yet on the timing of the GE. but we have to plan on taking such additional measures to safeguard the health of Singaporeans. And I stress that these precautions and measures will be needed, whether the election is held early or later.